So to begin, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Sandra Ainsley. She's the owner of the Sandra Ainsley Gallery, located in Toronto, Ontario, and it is one of North America's leading contemporary glass galleries. The Ainsley Gallery represents over 60 artists, including Tanya, Lyons, and I'm going to turn it over to Sandra now to introduce Tanya to us. Thank you.
Susan, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you so much to the Canadian Society of the Decorative Arts for inviting really Tanya and in turn me, and it actually gives me a chance to see Tanya. I haven't seen her in years, to be honest, and we have a long relationship. I've been representing Tanya. She reminded me of this the other day, and I thought it can't be true. But since the year 2000, that's when we did our first exhibition together, I think, isn't that right? So I would have known her before then. I believe I knew Tanya when she was a student at Sheridan. I was pretty impressed when I started to review your education, because you were an honors student at Sheridan. You taught glass at Sheridan. You attended the University of Helsinki in Finland in arts and designs, and that was back in 1994 and 1995, which seems incredible. And I believe you attended University for the Arts in Japan as well. How did you do all that back in those years? I mean, you were really a bit of a trailblazer when you think about it, or at least that's how I felt about it when I reread it, Tanya, because a lot of people, not that I should say a lot of people in Toronto, they really weren't leaving home and going to Japan or Finland. How did you come to be inspired to do that?
Well, I had an amazing mentor, Daniel Crichton, and he was the head of the Sheridan College Glass program, and he provided endless opportunities for the glass artists coming through that program. So yeah, I can thank it all for Daniel.
You know, to diverge just a bit, unfortunately, Daniel passed away. To those who don't know who Daniel was, but he was really the leading figure at Sheridan, but really across Canada in establishing the movement, aside from being a great artist himself, and there's no knowing how far Daniel would have gone as well. Sure. So you were lucky to have that influence.
I was. It was amazing. It truly was, yeah.
I knew him as well, not as well as you did, but he was an inspiring person. So what always interests me, you consider yourself a gatherer, which I think is such a beautiful word, that you collect objects. What does being a gatherer mean to you, though?
Well, it's kind of moving through life and picking up little bits as you go through life, and it kind of makes you who you are. And for me, my environment, my surrounding is really important. And so a lot of, as places I go, I pick up little treasures because they're souvenirs, but they're also inspirational objects. And so I like to fill my space with objects that inspire me. And often it's driftwood and rocks and various natural objects that I bring home with me, and moments and people and stuff. I think it's kind of, life makes us who we are.
I should mention, when you say take home, that you are in Killaloe, which right now is probably one of the most beautiful places in all of Canada. Your change of color up there must be remarkable this year.
It is. It's been actually quite impressive this year, and it's been long lasting. Sometimes we have big storms that come in and blow all the leaves down, but it's been weeks now with this big blazing change of color, and it's quite phenomenal. Like the shades of green to yellow to red. It's beautiful.
So I said that the first time I did an exhibition with you was in the early 2000s, and I'm delighted that we've planned another exhibition for next year. But early next year, February the 13th, 2023. So it's good that all good things come around.
Yes, for sure. It's I'm very excited to be showing again with you. You have such a marvelous large space, which is for me, you provide an environment for people to have experiences with glass. And so it's exciting for me, for sure.
Well, we have a special space for you this year that can be, or next year that can be all yours, and they'll have lots of room for your large pieces. But
Yeah.
I think enough of me talking to you. I'm sure everyone would like to hear more about your career and your inspirations.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to this exhibition. So I'll start my talk now.
Hey, lovely.
I'm just going to open up my screen. Okay. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to tell my story about how glass has affected me and supported me through many life changes and transitions. I'm a gatherer, observing, collecting, and taking in moments, memories, and details. Everywhere I go, every person I meet, I leave, taking traces with me. I am a twin, born in Barry's Bay, Ontario. I lived in a farmhouse with no electricity or running water. Later, we moved to Stratford, Ontario, and I grew up between these hills and Stratford. My mother worked in props at the Stratford Festival Theatre, which was a huge influence on me. In 1992, I went to Sheridan College for wood with glass as my second studio. There, I discovered the magic of glass, and I can say, like many others, that I wouldn't be in glass if it weren't for Daniel Crichton, head of the Sheridan College Glass Program. For my third year, I traveled to Finland on exchange at the University of Art and Design, Helsinki. During my time there, I made the first pieces that would lead me to where I am now. The first thing I did was to let go of color, and I started to focus on glass as a conceptual material and all the qualities that it held. From there came self-thought and reflection, looking at who I was and where I came from. After growing up in the bush, I realized that the most natural starting point for me would be nature and the power it held. The first piece I made was an installation titled Medicine Woman, using clear glass as a carrier with natural objects within. I feel strongly about this piece being my starting point because it has the idea of healing and supporting others, which for me is a lot about why I make art. I returned to Canada, completed my final year at Sheridan College, graduating in 1996. From there, I traveled to Atlan, BC to attend a 3-week course titled Idea and the Creative Process. I spent time thinking about the interaction of people. I created work combining natural objects and looking how they interacted and affected each other. This was a powerful time, engaging with so many people who were also exploring the creative process and the power it held to express, heal, and transform. In 1997, I was accepted into the graduate program at the Toyama Institute of Glass Art. This is where I lived for just over a year. It was an inspiring place. There were rice fields behind the school, and it was here that I made my first life-size dresses. I created the piece Mood Changing with the idea of changing how you feel as easily as changing your clothes. This was a very inspiring and transforming time that I shared with an amazing class. I returned in 1998 and started assisting Daniel Crichton teaching first year at Sheridan College. I became an artist in residence at Harbourfront and a member of the board of directors at the Glass Art Association of Canada. Without much time for reflection, I continued to use glass to express and understand what surrounded me. This piece is titled Rebirth and Gathering Bowls. I had my first solo exhibition in 1999 titled Flight at Material Matters. It's Within and Mother In 2001, I had another solo exhibition, In Between Here and There, at Material Matters. As time raced on, glass was a constant in my life and a perfect vehicle to express what moved through me. As moments changed, my glass changed, for I was always searching for new ways to use glass to communicate who we are. I started participating in glass fashion shows with Laura Donifer and started creating various glassware pieces, as well as making some pieces for individuals, such as a wedding dress and a piece for a CBC TV host. In 2002, I moved to Montreal. Life was changing again. In 2003, I had an exhibition titled Shh at Material Matters. This was reflecting a time of loss and two very overwhelming years, the passing of Daniel Crichton and a close family friend. It was one of those shows that pulls you apart, but at the same time puts you back together again. It pulled me through, and I realized that expressing moments in life that we all go through at one point or another is extremely important. In 2003, I was commissioned to make a piece for Hotel Le Germain in Toronto. I created a 12-foot stainless mesh wall dress with glass flowers. In 2004, I had an exhibition of new work at Gallery Ellen Lee in Montreal titled Fleeting Thoughts. I had started making life-size dresses again, as well as ones that hung on the wall. I had started thinking about how people used clothing to express who they are or who they wanted to be. A lot happened in 2005. I received a Canada Council grant for a project to explore conceptual ideas around Asian fishing baskets and traps. This grant was a great opportunity to explore different glass techniques. I had an exhibition at Material Matters titled Trapped. I also won the Prix François Haudet through the City of Montreal. This was an honor because of Francois' work and vision, and for this prize, I had an exhibition titled Shells and Shields. This piece is called Armor, Denied, Obsession. In 2005, I also traveled to Sofa, New York with Gallery Ellen Lee to show my wall dresses for the first time. It was the beginning of a very close working relationship with Ellen Lee, who nurtured and supported me, as well as so many other Canadian artists. I continued these shows until 2012. Life continued to change, and I continued developing new work, exploring ideas and new techniques. I created pieces around dividing spaces. I started the kimono series, thinking about the land we surround ourselves with. A series of aprons titled Domestic Beauty, as well as a series of shoes. With all of this work comes a lot of packing. In 2008, I had an exhibition at the Sandra Ainsley Gallery titled To Survive. I was exploring concepts to help us survive. This was an amazing opportunity to show large-scale conceptual work in a beautiful space. For rest, for freedom, for identity. In 2008, I also had an exhibition titled Reflect at the Canadian Clay and Glass Museum, another opportunity to make large-scale installational work that transformed the space you entered. I was then invited by theater designer Susan Benson to make pieces for the opening event at the new Toronto Opera House, another incredible experience working on space and atmosphere. I continued working and developing new pieces, including many private commissions. Then life changed again, In 2009, I married glass artist Mathieu Grodet and moved to Lachute, Quebec. I continued working, learning flame working, and collaborating on pieces with Mathieu, developing new work with tiny details and continuing to express what was around me. This piece is 2 for tea. In 2010, I had the opportunity to present a large grouping of my work in an exhibition titled Dressing Up at Gallery Materia in Quebec City. Morning after, dressing up. In 2012, I had Amara. Life changed a lot and work slowed. The first pieces I made after her birth was Lumiere. Then in 2014, I had an exhibition with Gallery Elena Lee titled New Life. I was exploring new directions for conceptual expression, exploring different materials, and making a series of mandalas. Birth, mother, questionable power, two dreams. Then at the end of 2014, life changed again. Mathieu and I separated and I moved to Killu, Ontario. I entered into a large transition and I continued to work through the changing times. I set up a small studio in the front room and I continued to make pieces. Since 2006, I have been teaching drawing for glass in the glass program at the Halliburton School of Art and Design. I continue to do so as well as a skills building class. I have always valued supporting and mentoring people in creative ways. In 2015, I received a kimono commission for a cruise ship with the Holland America line. In 2016 was the opening of a new pavilion at the National Museum of Fine Arts in Quebec City. It is a great honor to be part of this collection and to be presented beside the piece of Francois Haudet. In 2016, I had an exhibition in Barry's Bay at the old railway station titled Coming Home to the Enchanted Land. Finding love, shelter from the storm, survival, gathered memories. 2017, life continued to transition and change. Nothing was as I had expected, and I entered into a dark period and turned to glass to reflect and support this transforming time. I started working on new pieces to process what I was going through. Making has always been a place to express and release what is happening. I made an open kimono titled Remaking and started a collaborative piece titled We Bleed, inviting women from the community to make red glass beads and sew them onto a dress. Later, some of the women were photographed in the dress. In 2019, I presented an exhibition in Toronto at Craft, Ontario, titled Inside Out. This was an exhibition exploring re-entry into community through collaborative art making and exploring and exposing who we are. I created various conceptual pieces to process this time. This is Gown to Escape Madness, Release and Let Go, Healing Forest Branches, and Table of Tales. For this piece, I held a number of dinner parties and we talked about the stories this table could hold. Since 2017, since being in Killaloe, I have been involved with the amazing local Ottawa Valley Community Arts Organization, working on public art projects and exhibitions. For a fundraiser event called Eat Your Art Out, I created Water to Ice. At this time, I had a co-op student, Abigail Clapper, from local high schools working with me on this project. Abby also modeled this piece for the event. Since 2017, I've been part of the volunteer coordinating team of the Madawaska Valley Studio Tour. It's wonderful to have so many great artists and artisans living and working in these hills, and I feel it is so important for people to see where and how work is made, as well as creating an opportunity for people to support artists in their studios. In 2021, my wonderful partner built me a new studio building, which has been a total life changer. Space is so important to creativity and making. Between 2021 and 2022, I had a couple private commissions, one for a stainless mesh dress with glass blossoms and a 6-foot pair of overalls. And they hang on a 20-foot fireplace. In 2021, I had an amazing opportunity to collaborate with French fashion designer Simon Porte-Jacquemus of the Jacquemus label. I was commissioned to make 3,000 glass strips for a piece in his spring collection, Le Splash. It was also exciting to have Dua Lipa wear this suit while she was in Paris for a concert. In 2021 and 2022, I volunteered to host another high school co-op student, Evan Nickerson. They learned about glass and the creative process, as well as assisting me with my work. In 2021, I was very fortunate to receive a Canada Council for the Arts grant to explore change with glass. Having time as an artist to develop new work and to explore new directions is extremely important and valuable. I had been noticing how change was becoming a constant in our lives. Surrounded by unpredictable times, I wanted to reflect on the growth and the transformation that can come out of change and the value it holds. This grant also enabled me to hire 3 wonderful people to contemplate and process change while assisting me with the assembly of the cloaks. This continued to magnify the importance of creating space for mentoring, community creativity, and the repercussions that it can have. It has been wonderful to work through this project and to make pieces on this scale with this kind of detail, exploring different glass techniques and shifting into working with colored glass. The transitions of color are magical and amazing to explore. I'm looking forward to the work that will develop from these details. I'm excited to announce that I will be presenting this work at Sandra Ainsley Gallery in February on the 11th, as well as new pieces that are coming out of this new direction. Exploring color while continuing to look at who we are through clothing, expressing personalities, emotions, and moments in time. I hope to create experiences for people that trigger thoughts, ideas, and questions about who we are and how we live.
Wow.
Here is wonderful Amara, my best creation ever, and the most consuming. 10 years old and living in France right now, giving me time to focus on my work.
She'll be back soon though, won't she?
Yes, in a
Before
couple
you know
months.
it.
Yeah. Thank you for reflecting on the transformative possibilities of art and glass through life. Whether a maker or a viewer, art can be a huge support for transformation, change, and release. Thank you for attending this presentation, and thank you again to the Canadian Society of Decorative Arts and the Sandra Ainsley Gallery for inviting me to speak about my journey with glass. Thank you.
That was great, Tanya. I'm like so incredibly excited to see the new work that you've created since receiving the Canada grant. I can't believe the color. It
Yeah.
looks so beautiful and fresh, and that's
Yeah,
very exciting. Thanks for the preview.
you're welcome. And I'll give you a little peek. I started making little forget-me-nots for a forget-me-not dress, so you can see.
Oh, beautiful. So I think there's a couple of questions here. I have some questions, but I can't seem to access them. If anyone else can, I'm not sure if Susan, if you can see them. Can you? Thank you. They're not showing up. Thank you.
So these are both about supplies or, materials. So Tanya, someone is asking where you get your glass supplies from. Then there's a secondary question about where all your glass garments, are they made entirely of glass? I think I heard you talk about steel or mesh. So there's an interest in knowing about all of the materials that go in, particularly into your dresses and those large pieces. Did any of your garment pieces have a frame or outline made from other materials in addition to glass? And what is the fabric of the clothing that those dresses are? So they're all related.
Okay, so I'll kind of go through that. So the flame working glass that I use, it is actually made in Italy, which is actually, and many glass artists, I think not even flame working glass artists, many glass artists are experiencing the crisis that is taking place in Europe right now because of the energy crisis. I've heard that a number of the glass factories that make this material is actually shutting down for the winter potentially. So that could be interesting. Right now, I have quite a bit of stockpile of glass. So I mostly, for the flame working that I do, I use a soft glass as well. So it's I don't need like a large torch or a large oxygen tank unless I wanted to make some larger work. Also with this grant, I've been exploring upcycling glass. So I do, besides gathering natural objects and everything else around, I'm a supply hoarder. And so I do keep wine bottles, and I had a local business, a door factory, donate me skids of plate glass. So I've been also exploring upcycling. And so in these cloaks, I actually used some upcycled glass as well. And that's really interesting. It just adds to the process of making. And you don't get this amazing variety of colored. And that's one thing that I've dove into is with this Moretti glass that I use. You can buy it in any shade of color that you are wanting to work in. And that's amazing to explore that transition of color from like a dark shade of green to a light shade. For my pieces, when the floor dresses, I first started with kind of just a loose mesh when I started making them in Japan. And then when I restarted making them, I had actually stainless steel structure made to then cover with mesh and glass. But these cloaks are all basically, it's a stainless steel mesh cloak that I make. So I buy my stainless steel mesh in like a big roll like fabric. and I do a pattern and cut it. It's all hand sewn, and into the edge is like a stiff stainless wire that I've sewn in. So that helps me give shape to the cloak. But it is still like fabric. It is, the mesh is pliable, and it does change as I work on it. And then the other materials on the cloak is I also collect, and is old textiles, ribbon, lace. And so I wanted to also dive into a little bit of textile exploration. So in the bottom back of the first cloak, there's some needle felting of organic cotton and milkweed fluff and mixed textiles. Then I also explored needle punching into the metal stainless mesh that creates loops, different tightnesses of loops. So I've been really interested also in like texture, and with glass as well. I like to what's called quenching it in baking soda water. So I just have a solution of water and baking soda, and when the glass is hot, I put it into that solution. And so the feathers on the back of the first cloak, they're all crackling and aging, and I really like to dive into that. Like glass has always been, and a big reason why I didn't use color for 20 odd years is that it's eye candy and it's very seductive, and clear glasses obviously as well. But so now I want to dive into that, and I want to pull that that seductive eye candy out. But I also at the same time like to show wear and tear and aging on the glass. So yes, hopefully I answered all those questions.
There's quite a bit of dialogue in your pieces. You know, most, not all glass, but a lot of glass, you look at it and you might have an emotion. It's beautiful. It makes you feel good. It's maybe not beautiful. It's meant to have another emotion. But when you look at your work, it makes you think about many different things, whether it's not just the material, but where would you wear that dress, or who's wearing that dress, or where did you get the idea from? So it really gets you thinking about a lot of different things.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And I think just to add to that, someone is asking where people do wear your dress. It's like, does anyone wear your dress? And if so, where do they wear your dress?
Most of my work is non-wearable, but I do love the idea of wearing glass. And I loved that Laura Donifer created all these opportunities for glass artists to make wearable glass, because you're wearing, like, it's very unexpected to wear glass. So that's a big part of it. But most of my wearable pieces have been fashion shows or special events, besides a wedding dress that I did, and an outfit for a CBC host. And since this project with Jacques Miss, the French fashion designer, I have had people contact me about wanting their models to wear my pieces, not realizing that they're actually sculpture that hang on the wall. But I love that kind of idea of, and I would like to make more wearable pieces, but it's time.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be as extreme or as extravagant, but I think it would be a great venue for you to look at it. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have looked at doing just small elements that you add on instead of like a full glass dress as well. So a little more practical ideas.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that Canada Council grant is really a gift. I mean, that's exactly what it is, but in so many different ways. So I know right now you're working towards, let's say, this exhibition in February 2023. Where do you think you'll go after that? Hopefully we'll have a successful exhibition. That's without questioning. But What's your next direction?
I have a lot. I have like, I'm kind of one of these, I have too many ideas. So I have a lot of work. I actually even have some work in process that I started at the beginning of the pandemic that kind of got interrupted. I actually started to move away from the dress and the kimono form, and I started doing more panels, like just long, looking at starting some just rectangular panels and square panels of still continuing to use this metal mesh as a base, but then to add more materials. But once the pandemic came and I started homeschooling my daughter, I moved a lot of these pieces to the side, and then I received this grant. So for me, I've been kind of just running along with the opportunities, but I definitely see more work going towards kind of creating atmosphere and changing your space. And I do still like large installations that when you walk in, you actually have a physical experience besides just a visual experience. So lots of possibilities.
No, I have a client that commissioned many years ago 3 very large scale kimonos from you.
Yes.
And she has quite a bit of art in her home, but when you walk in, it's an entire wall. They're so large and it's so much impact.
Yes, I remember that.
It reminds me when you were commissioned by was it the Saint Germain Hotel?
Yep.
A great direction for you, I would think.
Yeah.
Public spaces like that.
Yes, yeah.
For you, definitely.
I think like that is a big part of like where the theater background came into. I realized that just the magic that theater offers for people to kind of escape into another space. And I think art can be a platform of escapism, but also a change of atmosphere. And I always loved when the lights went out at the beginning and they came back on and you were transformed to another space. And so I think that's always been part of wanting to make work that is life size. So it's physically engaging you on your perspective, your size. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
What an influence your mother had on your work.
Very much. Yes. My mother, she came from a family that you did art on Sundays. So becoming an artist wasn't an option in those days. And so for me, was extremely fortunate. We had an art room in our home. And, you know, I spent my PA days in the prop shop, playing around with all the scraps. So my mom was extremely supportive and inspiring as well to like encourage me to go off and just follow the glass dream.
You're very lucky.
Yes.
It's nice when part of you is still inside, your mother is still there. It's a great feeling, I'm sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So because I can't see if there's any questions, Susan.
Yes, there are.
Oh,
There
I'm going
are
to leave that
several.
to you.
So,
okay.
People are very intrigued by the interplay between fashion design and collaborating with fashion designers and your work. And so there are comments and questions. And so I'll give you a few of them, Tanya, and you can maybe speak to these. One person is saying collaborating with leading fashion designers seems like an obvious fit for leading artisans. Do fashion designers give adequate credit to people like you? Did your collaboration lead to any commissions by private collectors? Someone is interested in knowing more about the glass strips that you did for designer Simon Port Jacquemus. And then someone else is sort of touching on something that I'll come back to later, which you and I talked about privately, Tanya, the combination of glass and fashion being a little bit unsettling, and there's an incongruity of materials, how you reconcile that because of the fragility of glass and the risks associated with wearing glass.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that for the moment. There are some other questions and comments, but those ones cluster around fashion designers and your sculptural work.
Okay. So yes, working with established fashion designers is obviously a very kind of exciting opportunity. I did have another opportunity. Can't think of the date, but we had a fashion show in Montreal that was combining artists and fashion designers together, pairing them up to create pieces. So I worked with Marie St. Pierre out of Montreal to create a piece. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I love collaborating and enhancing people's possibilities with different techniques. And yeah, I guess for me, I'm basically open to opportunities. If it happens, it happens. I'm not very good at pursuing things. I've been in kind of a life change. Now that Amara is 10, I'm waking back up into the art world. And that's why I'm really excited about this exhibition with Sandra, just to give me a platform to work towards and to present my work. Because as an artist, that's really what you want to do, is to be able to put work out there in the world for people to see and experience. Working with Jacquemus, the glass strips, I'm not sure. Basically, they contacted me in November last year, and we worked back and forth on what they were interested in and what they were looking for. And I sent them samples, and it ended up being an extremely tight turnaround, which I just dove in and said, sure, why not? And as many glass artists, we do production to a degree. I started out not wanting to be a production glass artist, and so I never created a line of production. I don't actually make jewelry and stuff that is out there in the world. I obviously have some stuff that I do for my studio tour, but it became a repetition. And it's something that, like, as even for my work, I want to make a dress, but I need to make 300 glass flowers for it. So there's levels of production, but it was a bit intense, but it's also extremely magical to be able to make these objects, send them off into someone to create the suit that they did. I think it's great opportunity. And then for wearing glass, I love wearing glass, and I think I love pushing the norm. Like, glass, people assume glass is fragile, it's going to break, and that you don't wear it except for maybe some earrings or something. But I think glass is actually really strong. It bounces sometimes when it hits the ground. I've always found it's a lot more resilient than ceramics. Ceramics to me is a little more brittle, and glass lasts through time, thousands of years. So it has its fragility, and I've definitely been exploring that in these cloaks. I've kind of been going to the extreme, making really tiny glass pine needles and things like that. But it also has this internal strength, and so and wearing it, it also warms up to your body temperature. So I think it's a really nice material to wear. It has a little bit of a weight, so you feel it. So yeah, I love wearing glass and making people, kind of putting people in their out of the box and in the uncomfortable safe spot to experience things.
You know, when you were talking about your glass before, you talked about flame working. Maybe you could just briefly explain what flame working is, because it's
For
the
sure.
glass using on the dresses.
When I started glass blowing, I started in the large hot shop blowing glass, I call it big glass. And it's amazing and wonderful, but it also is a little bit limiting on the tiny detail that you can do. And so for me with flame working, it's a small torch, and it's a very completely different atmosphere. It's a lot more meditative. Well, for me, I'm sitting, and it's quite of a calm space, but it also enables me to make, I'm going to try to show you these. super tiny details, but also I can make little tiny loops on the back of my parts. And so that enables me to wire everything together. And so for me, flame working is actually quite wonderful in that way, because now I have the ability to wire everything together and I don't have to use glue or anything like that. So flame working is actually quite wonderful for the direction that I've gone in. And I miss big hot studio glass blowing quite often, but this opens up a whole other opportunity for me of details and yeah, and more techniques. And that's what I think I really love. And it's something I do in Halliburton at the school, is taking these different techniques and you can blend them together. So on my first cloak, there's plate glass, there's mirror, there's many different types of glass, and you can then use endless techniques, sandblasting and things to affect the material. So flame working is just kind of another tool.
So the cloaks that we're looking at, are these cloaks that are meant to be worn in any way? Would anyone wear them? No,
these ones aren't. I am actually gonna try photographing them with being worn. I think for photographing,
very cool.
That's very exciting to do stage imagery. And so, but I do like, this is a thing for me. Once I start making pieces, I start having ideas for more pieces. And that's why I'm excited about the exhibition with you. And then I just, of course, many people want to wear these pieces. So I keep thinking about making wearable parts and pieces.
Yes, I think I know someone who would like you to make them something to wear. Yeah. So give some thought.
Okay.
Be able to execute that. Okay.
For sure. I think, yeah, it's a whole other side of things. And I think there's lots of possibility.
It's an exciting direction. It is. So Susan, sorry, are there any other?
Yes, there are.
Okay, I'm going to turn it to you. I don't know. I haven't got anything I can access here for some reason.
That's okay. We're being a tag team. Someone's very interested to know how long it takes you to make a dress, and I would think that it really varies on how much detail and how intricate the individual pieces are on the dress. But can you give us a range, like from one type of dress to one that
for sure
requires more?
Even within these cloaks, there's some of the cloaks have a lot more glass on it, and these pieces are kind of pieces that could probably be endless, that I could continue to dive into the details. There's so many layers. But sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's easy to do.
Yeah, sorry, Susan, did you?
And someone's interested in just how much time is required.
Okay.
And sorry, so I'm looking behind you at the cloak that's behind you. And that one looks simpler than the ones that you were showing us most recently.
Well, these are all the new pieces that are behind me.
Oh, they are.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And there is like a kimono that's kind of hanging in the back. So for making them, I start by doing a life-size paper pattern. So I draw out what I want to be making. I kind of touched on that with the images of the commissions I did. And so then I'll roll out the mesh. And so I guess it's like my canvas, making the stainless mesh object. So I'll hand sew that, and that can take anywhere from 2 days to maybe 5 days, depending on how big the piece is and how much sewing there is on the dresses. Like with the cloaks, they're all kind of fairly similar, but they get sewn, and then they get sewn like a metal edging into them. So there's many layers. And then obviously I don't work on one piece at a time because of the process of making many little parts. And then they have to cool down, and then I don't touch them to the next day. There's always back and forth of working on the glass, working on the sewing and stuff. But I would say probably like from 2 weeks if I was just focused hard on that. But it's more like a month to a month and a half would be reasonable, just because of the back and forth of making and then adding the parts, and then you figure out what else you need to do, and then you go back to the studio. So it's kind of a bit of a process.
One person is asking you to comment on the last pieces that you showed us that are going to go into the exhibition. I have to say that when I saw the little scene with the little, almost like little bits of lichen or the small mushrooms coming out on the scene, I found that really glorious. I just thought it was exquisite. It was so evocative of fairies and, you know, an elfin life, or
Yes.
a child's wonderland, as well as what it's like to be in the woods and to see the marvel of all of this. I don't know if, oh, fantastic, Daniel, or is that you, Tanya, for
Daniel.
putting that up? Fantastic.
Oh, great.
This, I think there's real interest in this. I can see the, you know, fungi and lichens and the like. Can you elaborate on this? Because it is so fanciful. It's so fantastical in a way. And it's really glorious and celebratory of nature, of being in nature, and really honing in and seeing what's there and the small things that are there. Yeah, that's an absolutely exquisite detail. Can you talk to us a little bit about the inspiration for those things? And
For sure, for sure. So when I started making these 4 cloaks, the idea was exploring change with glass. And the idea is that I wanted to explore many different parts of change. A big part that we are in, especially as Canadians, we are in this 4-season cycle. And we just keep going around through that. And I find those seasons affect us quite powerfully. But then within those seasons and those experiences, there's a lot to do with opening and closing, life and death, beginnings and endings. So I started with the first closed cloak that is like winter. And then when it was actually just starting to be spring, when I started on the this green cloak opening, and I didn't work a lot with colored glass in the past, and diving into making these green growths was magical. It was just like this new growth, this life that was coming out of the dark winter months. And I found that for me, that's where like a lot of the magic is. I am surrounded by the woods around here, and I spend a lot of time in the forest. It is a very powerful, healing, magical space. And so yes, looking at those details, those little tiny spaces that kind of move us. These cloaks, I wanted to kind of have many states of change. So this one's starting that new growth, that new ideas, this kind of life coming out of the earth. And so, yeah, that's where I'm really excited also about this exhibition, because each cloak has so many little aspects of change that now I want to take those details and focus them into one piece. Like I was mentioning, I've been making many forget-me-nots to make a forget-me-not dress. So there's I find like that's, if I want to work in color and I want to work in ideas of experiences, I want to get into those detail. And that's what the flame working really allows me to do. And in this image right here, you can see the textile exploration as well. And I just find it really interesting, the combination of materials. I always loved the metal mesh, because in my pieces, people have that preconceived idea that metal is really strong and heavy. And in my pieces, they're usually the light, fragile element of my pieces. And then the glass comes on with strength. And so that's what I've really loved, is these kind of play on materials the cold metal, the soft textile, and then the warm glass on top of that. I think it's yeah, very fascinating.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to sharing these pieces with everyone, and that's why I'm excited about Sandra's space, because that is also a big thing, is having the proper space to present work in so people can move around it and experience it. So it's exciting.
I should probably mention at this time, because we're talking so much about the exhibition, I hope that anyone who's online with us will go to our website and put your names on our mailing list so that we can invite you to come to the exhibition and meet Tanya, as well as see this new direction of hers.
Mhm.
So just go to sandraainsleygalery.com and you can do that.
One more question. Someone is asking about the response of your Japanese colleagues to the kimono, that to a non-Asian person's interpretation of the kimono.
I haven't had direct conversations with my classmates, because I actually started making the kimonos many, many years after I left Japan. But I have engaged with other Asian people, and most people it's all been a positive experience. I really admire the kimono form and the idea of that it's basically one size. And the fact that when each individual puts it on, it fits their body just in the way you wrap it and fold it and tie it on. So for me, it's I think part of it is that it's also a very powerful visual form, the kimono shape. It reminds me of architecture as well. And I think that's why the landscape and it drew me, is this idea of what we surround ourselves with. And so, yeah, I so far I've just had positive feedback. And that's another thing, though, that leads me to, like, I started with dresses and then I moved to this kimono form because I felt it quite powerful in how people used it in society. But now I wanted to go to the cloak form, and that was a conscious decision, because as a Canadian, living where we have lots of winter and stuff, you hibernate, you surround yourself. And I've been drawn to the cloak form because it also, to me, reminds me of shelter. It has this kind of structure of like a teepee type or shelter form. And so I love this idea that it's more surrounding, and it's more maybe connected to the earth and the fantastical and the fairy life and dreams. So I really enjoyed moving to the cloak form. And I think like making wearable cloaks could be something really interesting, because it is something that comes on and off, and it's like a second layer. So yeah.
Very good.
Is there other questions, Susan?
So
I think we've pretty much touched on everything. There was one question about, I'm not sure if it's one that you can easily answer. It was about how your work is different from stained glass. I don't know if that's something you can.
I'll talk about that, and I'll also touch on what you were talking with me at the beginning.
Yes. Okay.
Of things. So with stained glass, it's a cold process, whereas what I'm doing is a hot process. And with glass, we have cold, warm, and hot techniques. So with cold, the glass is always cold. It's never being affected with heat in any way. So it's being cut and foiled together, different pieces, and it's usually flat or structurally built up like lamps or forms, but with flat pieces. So with what I'm doing, I'm actually taking glass and melting it into a molten state and sculpting it. So when I start with my glass, it's just a thin rod of glass, like a pencil, and then I heat it into a blob, and then then I start to sculpt it and shape it. or even blow it. On the torch, I have a little tiny stainless pipe that I can put a blob of glass on the end and blow little bubbles. So what I do is hot, but I've also started exploring the warm techniques. So you can also take the material for stained glass, cut flat pieces and put them in a kiln and warm that up. And those pieces can fuse together. And then you can also slump those pieces. So you can take stained glass techniques and bring them into the warm, and then even take it from there into the hot, because you can fuse pieces of glass together, create a pattern with it, and then you can reheat it up again and pick it up in the hot studio and actually blow that glass. So really, it just shows the endless possibilities of glass and just how amazing the material is too. And then I'll just speak to your question that you were talking to me in the beginning. You were talking about glass and its idea of fragility and me using it with wearable work, but also to this feminist type of side. And I think I was thinking about that as you were speaking, and I was thinking it was kind of interesting because often women are preconceived as fragile objects that can't do anything or withstand being breakable. We're very breakable. And so for me, I like to think of that maybe I'm a bit like glass and I'm not breakable, or maybe I also love that many people embrace cracks, and the Japanese embrace broken cracks and accent it with gold. And so I think oftentimes, and I like to crackle my glass and weather my glass and age it and show those imperfections. So I think, I think it's kind of a nice play. I've always liked to kind of create these unexpected experiences. So something might look really beautiful from far away, like my armor piece, but then when you get up close to it, it actually has all these stainless steel spikes coming out of it. And so I like to not always make people feel like they know already, they can assume what it is. I like to have this unexpected experience as well to kind of trigger thoughts and ideas and push the norm. You know, we got to step out of that box that we've been brainwashed into and embrace like I love that we are in the International Year of Glass, and I love that they've also stated that we've moved into the age of glass. And I think it's wonderful to kind of recognize the powerful material that glass is, and versatility too, the fact that you can recycle it, and but it does break. And for this grant, I actually, because I was exploring change with glass, part of this grant I wrote in was to have a few workshops. So I invited people from my community to come here and experience glass. So they could smash glass with a hammer, they could engrave it, they could sandblast it, they could take a piece of bottle glass and melt it in the fire. And I think, you know, glass, it's hard. It teaches you not to be attached. And that's something that I've been learning, to let go of so many things and not to be attached, because it can break. And it's really hard. You can, excuse me, be working on something for months, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm making these little tiny fragile growth pieces, which you can easily just, you know, get caught on your sweater and snap off. So I think it also teaches you to let go as well. Show you my little.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And you also, I felt, partially answered my question in it earlier when you talked about how it warms to your body. So it's responsive to contact, and it's remarkably strong. So I like all of the things that you're saying, because I think when we first look at it, we think about its fragility and how it can be shattered so quickly. And when I was first looking at your work, I was looking at it to some extent through a feminist lens. And I was thinking, oh, that's really interesting that she would do that. But it's what you've done is you've really blown apart that narrow conception of glass and using glass to illustrate the feminine.
Well, they also describe glass as very seductive. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
all these things.
it. Exactly.
and that's why I really, when I started working with the material and decided, like, I stopped using colored glass, was a big part of the conceptual potential of this material. And I thought it was endless, and it was so exciting to be able to explore emotions through a material. And I think that's a big thing of getting as an artist, is you learn materials and you work with materials and you explore materials. And I think that I love materials, obviously you can tell in these cloaks, and just to kind of keep to dive into that and to use them in unexpected ways or untraditional ways. Like, I really loved the opportunity to make my Asian fishing baskets and traps, because I was kind of hot sculpting these ribs and these bars in the air and on wooden forms. And so that was really exciting to kind of not make these large pieces, but all out of these individual ribs. So yeah, it's a magical material, you know.
It is, isn't it?
It is.
You're very lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all artistic people are lucky, but when you have a passion for what you do, and when it really encapsulates so many different things, glass, you're very, very fortunate. And the way you keep changing and growing with it, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Good. So
I know it's not always, I remember when I started, I had an exhibition at one point and someone thought there was like 5 different artists in this exhibition, but it was all my work. And sometimes I've kind of, you know, people like to recognize people's work, and I've sometimes gone off my path of being recognizable, Tanya Lyons glass, but I really loved those experiences because it then teaches you so much more about the material. So yeah,
I think that's great. There's a few artists like you, Tanya, that, you know, they're known for a particular direction, and then suddenly they just don't want to be seen or be labeled that way, and they go off in an entirely different direction, which you might not see quite as much if you're at an exhibition of a painter. It tends to be very similar or of the same series. But with the glass arts, you don't know what you're going to get.
and that's the wonderful part. I think it's, yeah.
Okay, well, Susan, I hate to keep asking you, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. There is one, people keep adding here. So
Okay.
I think after these 2 final questions, we'll wrap it up because we are now at 4:15. So 2 different, one from the other, different questions. One is, the glass process doesn't lend itself readily to spontaneity, or this is that person's conclusion. Can you comment on that? And then the other question is about the basket ribs, and did they need to be annealed?
Yes, all the glass that I make needs to be annealed. And so that's always the big thing. You don't actually physically touch your glass until the next day. So there, at the time I was doing that work, I was renting time at Espace Vert in Montreal, and they had a very large annealer, so I could fit this work in it. And that also speaks to needing large equipment to support the work you want to make. And then the other question you had asked me, about the spontaneity. And yes, glass is phenomenal for spontaneity. Like when I'm making my little growth pieces here, I'm starting with a hot blob of glass, and then I'm pulling and I'm moving it, and I'm just feeling the liquid material. And as it cools, I'm kind of holding it in these curves, and it sets up. And so, yes, like these are all one of a kind. Each piece I make just is made in the moment, and the glass is, changes as it goes.
That's terrific. Well, I think it's time to bring this to a close. It's been really delightful, actually, and figuring out a way to spend Sunday afternoon with the two of you and to see the richness of your work and to see how it's evolving and what we can anticipate in February at the exhibition. So I do want to thank both of you very, very much on behalf of the CSDA for joining us today. I also would like to, here's Daniel on cue. We've got some events that are up and coming, and I'd like to just bring them to your attention. Later this week, through the Ornamentum virtual lecture series, there's going to be an event on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. About retailing radio, how the T. Eaton Company sold the idea of radio in the 1920s and 30s in Canada, with Professor or Dr. Michael Windover, who's an associate professor and the head of art and architectural history at Carleton University. So if you haven't yet signed up for that, please do. And you can see on the bottom left-hand corner various ways to connect with us to do so. We're also in early November, we have an in-person members only event as part of CSDA Sundays. The Cis Bunting Weld Private Collectors Series. A private collector is inviting us into his home both at 10 o'clock in the morning and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a couple of hours. There's a limited number of people who can attend each of those 2 time slots, and we've already had significant interest. So if you are a member and you want to attend this is happening in Toronto, Ontario, and you can go to the website and learn more there and then enroll through Eventbrite. We're also very excited about an event that's going to happen at the end of November. It's a CSDA film screening at 6:30, and we're going to present Greta Meyer, the Queen of Danish Design. It's a screening with hot dogs in the Ted Rogers Cinema on Bloor Street in Toronto. And it will be a fundraising event to raise awareness for the decorative arts community in Canada through celebrating Giving Tuesday. And this is a documentary that looks at one of Denmark's most important designers, what she created, what her obsession with perfection cost her, and what her brilliant legacy has included. So again, please go to our website to learn more about that. So in conclusion, it's been wonderful to spend this afternoon with all of you. And if you are joining us for the first time, we would love to see you again and hope that you will find us on the web and through any of these other means of communication. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, too.
Thank you very much for having us, Susan.
Yes.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon, Tanya.
Yes, like
Work hard.
yes. Work we go.
Okay.